The stagecoach rattled into Idaho City on a blazing afternoon in July of 1872. And when the door swung open, every soul on Main Street stopped what they were doing to stare at the woman who emerged in a cloud of trail dust and impossible elegance. Priscilla Oliverson stepped down onto the packed earth wearing a traveling dress of deep emerald silk that had somehow survived the grueling journey from San Francisco. But it was the hat that made jaws drop and tongues wag. Perched atop her carefully arranged chestnut hair sat an elaborate creation of peacock feathers, ostrich plumes, and silk flowers that rose a good 8 inches above her head, swaying with each movement like a ship's mast in a gentle breeze. The miners lounging outside the Silver Dollar Saloon elbowed each other and grinned. The shopkeeper's wife covered her mouth with her hand, though whether to hide shock or laughter was unclear. 2 young boys pointed and whispered until their mother swatted them both on the shoulders. The general murmur that rippled through the crowd carried equal parts amusement and judgment, the particular kind of small-town mockery reserved for outsiders who dared to be different. Priscilla heard every snicker, caught every smirk, felt every dismissive glance like pinpricks against her skin. She had traveled 3 weeks to reach this God-forsaken mining town in the Idaho Territory, cramped in that miserable coach with 2 men who reeked of tobacco, and a woman who never stopped complaining about her rheumatism. Her inheritance from a distant uncle she had never met consisted of a supposedly profitable millinery shop on this very street, though from the looks of the ramshackle buildings and muddy thoroughfare, she was beginning to suspect the joke was on her. She straightened her spine, adjusted her magnificent hat with deliberate care, and reached for her carpetbag just as a deep voice cut through the mockery like a knife through butter. "Well now, that is the finest hat I have seen in all my years, and I have been from Texas to Montana and back again." The crowd fell silent. Priscilla turned to find the speaker, and her breath caught in her throat despite her best efforts at composure. He was tall, this cowboy, with shoulders that stretched the fabric of his dusty shirt, and a face that the sun and wind had carved into something both rugged and arresting. His eyes were the color of creek water over stones, clear and startling beneath the brim of his worn Stetson. Those eyes held no mockery, no judgment, only genuine admiration as he looked at her hat, and then at her face with equal appreciation. He removed his own hat in a sweeping gesture that somehow managed to be both courtly and completely natural, holding it against his chest as he gave her a slight bow. "Owen Rutherford, madam, welcome to Idaho City." Anyone with the courage to wear such a grand creation in this dusty backwater deserves a proper greeting. The crowd shuffled uncomfortably. Several people suddenly remembered pressing business elsewhere. The shopkeeper's wife actually blushed, as though ashamed of her earlier reaction. Priscilla found her voice, though it came out softer than she intended. "Priscilla Oliverson, I thank you for your kindness, Mr. Rutherford." "Owen, please." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, carving dimples into his weathered cheeks. "Let me help you with your bags." "I assume you are here about the millinery shop. The whole town has been buzzing about Edgar Oliverson's mysterious heir from California." "I am that heir, though I confess the mystery was mutual. I never knew I had an uncle in Idaho until his lawyer contacted me 6 months ago." She watched as Owen effortlessly lifted her trunk from the back of the stagecoach, muscles flexing beneath his shirt. "Did you know him?" "Only to tip my hat to when I came to town for supplies. He was a quiet man, kept to himself mostly, but he made a fine hat when the occasion called for it. Fixed the band on this old thing for me once, would not take payment for it." Owen settled her trunk on his shoulder as though it weighed nothing. "Your shop is just down the street. I will walk you there if you do not mind the company." Priscilla minded very much, but only because this man unsettled her in ways she could not quite name. She had spent the last 5 years in San Francisco working as a seamstress, saving every penny, dreaming of something more than the cramped boarding house and the endless parade of society women who looked through her, as though she were invisible. She had learned to armor herself in dignity and pride, to stand tall even when the world tried to make her small. This cowboy with his kind eyes and easy smile threatened to crack that armor, and she had been in town all of 10 minutes. "I would appreciate that," she heard herself say. They walked down Main Street together, her heels clicking on the wooden boardwalk while his boots made softer sounds beside her. The hat bobbed and swayed with each step, catching the afternoon light. She was acutely aware of people watching from windows and doorways, of the whispers that followed in their wake. Owen seemed oblivious to it all, or perhaps simply unconcerned. "Idaho City is not much to look at right now," he said, his voice carrying that slight drawl that marked him as a man from somewhere further south. But in '63, this was the biggest city in the whole Northwest, bigger than Portland if you can believe it. The gold was flowing like water and men came from everywhere hoping to strike it rich. "And did you?" Priscilla asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "Forgive me, that was impertinent." "Not at all." Owen shook his head, that smile returning. "I never came here for gold. I came here for the land. Have a ranch about 10 miles north, up in the mountains where the grass grows sweet and the water runs clear. Raise cattle mostly, some horses. It is a good life, even if it is a solitary one." There was something in the way he said that last part that made Priscilla glance at him sharply. But his expression revealed nothing more than friendly openness. The millinery shop stood between a dry goods store and a boarding house, its painted sign proclaiming Oliverson Fine Hats in faded letters. The windows were dusty but intact, displaying several hat forms and a few completed creations that were serviceable if not inspired. Owen set down her trunk and produced a key from his pocket. "The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, asked me to hold on to this for you. He had to travel to Boise for a trial but said to tell you he would return next week to settle all the legal particulars." Owen handed her the key, his fingers brushing hers briefly in the exchange. The contact sent an unexpected warmth up her arm. Priscilla pulled her hand back quickly, focusing on the key rather than the feeling. "That was kind of you. I hope it was not too much trouble." "No trouble at all. In fact, I have been keeping an eye on the place, making sure no one bothered it. Your uncle was a good man, and his shop deserves to be cared for." Priscilla fit the key into the lock and turned it. The door swung open with a creak, revealing a space that was larger than she had expected. Sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, illuminating a long wooden counter, shelves lined with hat boxes and supplies, and a work table in the back covered with tools and materials. The air smelled of felt and leather, and something floral that she could not quite identify. "He grew lavender out back," Owen said, as though reading her thoughts. "Said it kept the moths away from the felt. There is a small living space upstairs, nothing fancy, but it has a good stove and the roof does not leak." Priscilla stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dimmer light. It was overwhelming, this sudden inheritance of a life she had never known existed. She had expected to feel excited, triumphant even, but instead she felt unmoored, adrift in a strange town full of people who had already decided she was something to laugh at. "You are wondering if you made a mistake coming here," Owen said quietly from the doorway. She turned to face him, surprised by his perception. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone paying attention." He stepped inside, setting her trunk down just past the threshold. "For what it is worth, I think you are exactly what this town needs. We have gotten too comfortable with our dust and our rough ways. A little elegance, a little beauty, that reminds people there is more to life than just scraping by. They were laughing at me, Priscilla said, then immediately wished she had not. It sounded petulant, childish. They were laughing at what they do not understand. Give them time. Owen moved to the window and wiped away some of the dust with his sleeve, letting in more light. Better yet, do not give them a second thought. You wear that hat like a queen wears a crown, and anyone with eyes can see it. Priscilla felt something in her chest loosen, just a fraction. You are very kind, Mr. Rutherford. Owen. But you do not have to say such things just to make me feel better. I am saying them because they are true. He turned from the window, and the afternoon light caught his profile, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the slight crook in his nose that suggested it had been broken at least once. I have been a rancher in these mountains for 8 years now, Miss Oliverson. In that time, I have learned that the territory breaks down into 2 kinds of people. Those who let the harshness make them small and mean, and those who bloom despite it all, who bring light to dark places. You strike me as the second kind. You determined all that from a hat. She meant it to sound sardonic, but it came out breathless instead. From the way you hold your head high even when you know people are mocking you. From the fact that you traveled all this way alone to claim an inheritance from a man you never met. That takes courage. Owen picked up his own hat from where he had set it on the counter. I should let you settle in. But if you need anything at all, my ranch is the Triple Bar R up the North Road. Ask anyone, they can give you directions. Thank you. Priscilla found herself not wanting him to leave, which was ridiculous. She had known this man for all of 20 minutes. Will I see you again? Count on it. Owen settled his Stetson back on his head, that dimpled smile returning. I come to town every Saturday for supplies, and now I have extra incentive knowing the millinery shop is open again. This old hat of mine could use replacing. He left then, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click. Priscilla stood in the middle of her uncle's shop, her shop now, and touched the elaborate feathers on her hat. Through the dusty window, she watched Owen Rutherford walk back down the street, tipping his hat to the ladies he passed with that same courtly gesture he had shown her. She had come to Idaho City expecting an opportunity, a chance to build something of her own. She had not expected to feel this flutter in her chest, this curious warmth that spread through her whenever she replayed his words in her mind. Grand, he had called her. Not the hat, though he had praised that too, but her. She was grand. Priscilla removed her spectacular hat and set it carefully on the counter, then rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The first week passed in a blur of cleaning and organizing. Priscilla scrubbed the windows until they sparkled, swept years of dust from the corners, and took inventory of all the supplies her uncle had left behind. She found his records too, meticulous accounts of every sale and purchase going back years. Edgar Oliverson had been a careful man, a detail-oriented man, and profitable enough to keep the shop running even as the gold rush faded and Idaho City shrank to a fraction of its former glory. The living space upstairs was small but serviceable, with a bedroom barely large enough for the narrow bed and dresser, and a kitchen area with the promised stove. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 other dresses in the tiny closet and arranging her sewing supplies on the kitchen table. At night, she lay in her uncle's bed and listened to the sounds of the town settling around her, the distant piano from the saloon, the occasional shout or burst of laughter, the creaking of the building itself. She thought about Owen Rutherford far more than was proper or wise. On Thursday, her first customer arrived. It was the shopkeeper's wife, the same woman who had covered her mouth on that first day. She entered the millinery shop with the air of someone on a mission, her face set in determined lines. "Miss Oliverson," she began, then paused, seeming to struggle with something. "I came to apologize for my rudeness when you arrived. It was unkind and unworthy, and I came to see about a hat. My daughter is getting married next month, and I would like something special for the occasion." Priscilla set down the felt she had been steaming and smiled. "I would be honored to create something for you. Please, sit down and tell me about your daughter and her wedding." The woman's name was Martha Green, and once she started talking, the words flowed like a river freed from a dam. Her daughter Sarah was marrying a rancher's son, a good man with prospects. The wedding would be at the church, followed by a celebration at the town hall. Martha wanted to look her best, wanted to feel beautiful, but everything she had was old and worn and dull. Priscilla listened, asked questions, made sketches. She pulled out fabrics and ribbons, testing colors against Martha's complexion. By the time the woman left an hour later, they had designed a lovely hat with a modest brim. Dove gray felt adorned with cream silk roses and a touch of lace. Martha's eyes had been shining when she departed, and she pressed Priscilla's hand warmly. "I am so glad you came to Idaho City, Miss Oliverson. We need more grace here, more beauty. Owen Rutherford was right about that." After Martha left, Priscilla stood at the window and watched the street, wondering what Owen had said to whom, and why it warmed her to know he had spoken of her. Saturday came bright and clear, and Priscilla woke with her heart beating faster than usual. She told herself it was simply excitement about the weekend when more people would be in town, potential customers who might need her services. She absolutely was not thinking about a certain rancher who had promised to visit. She wore her best dress, the blue one with the fitted bodice and full skirts, and she carefully arranged her hair before crowning it with the famous feathered hat. If the town wanted to snicker, let them snicker. She would wear her creativity with pride. The morning brought a steady trickle of customers, mostly people who were curious about the new shopkeeper. Priscilla smiled and answered questions and showed her wares, making mental notes about each person who entered. The mayor's wife needed a new Sunday hat. The bank clerk's daughter was interested in something fashionable. The saloon owner, a surprisingly refined woman named Delilah, wanted something dramatic for her establishment, something that would set the right tone. It was just past noon when Owen walked through the door, and Priscilla's breath caught despite her determination to remain composed. He had cleaned up from his usual work clothes, wearing dark trousers and a white shirt that made his sun-bronzed skin seem even darker by contrast. His hair, dark brown with hints of auburn in the sunlight, was damp as though recently washed. He held his battered Stetson in his hands, turning it nervously in a gesture that seemed at odds with his confident bearing. "Miss Oliverson," he said, then smiled. "Priscilla, if I may be so bold." "You are looking well." "Thank you, Owen. I am surprised to see you. I had not expected you until later." She gestured to the chair by her work table. "Please sit. You mentioned your hat needed replacing. In truth, I have been meaning to get a new one for months, but I kept putting it off." Seemed like a good excuse to visit. He sat, long legs stretching out in front of him. "How has your first week been? Is the town treating you better?" "Much better. I have had several customers, and Martha Green actually apologized for her initial reaction." Priscilla took his old hat, examining it carefully. The felt was worn thin in places, the band cracked and faded. "You have gotten good use out of this one. My father gave me that hat when I left Texas. It has been through a lot." Owen's voice carried a note of nostalgia. "But I reckon it is time to move forward. Can you make something similar but new?" "I can do better than that." Priscilla pulled out her measuring tape. "May I?" At his nod, she moved closer, measuring the circumference of his head, the distance from his temple to crown. This close, she could smell the clean scent of soap and something else, something woody and masculine that made her fingers tremble slightly as she worked. His hair was soft where it brushed her hands, and she noticed a small scar above his left ear. "You have worked with hats before," Owen observed, his voice slightly rough. "Your hands are very sure." "I was a seamstress in San Francisco for 5 years. Hats were not my specialty, but I made them occasionally for clients." Priscilla stepped back, creating distance between them before she did something foolish. "I am learning from my uncle's notes and supplies. He was very thorough in his documentation." "He would have liked you," Owen said. "Edgar always appreciated people who took pride in their work." "Did you know him well?" Priscilla began pulling out felt samples in various shades of brown and gray. "Well enough to respect him. He helped me when I first came to Idaho City, actually. I was young and stupid, thought I knew everything about ranching because my father raised cattle in Texas. But the territory is different, and I was failing, losing stock to the winters and my own ignorance." Owen leaned back in the chair, his gaze distant with memory. "Edgar was the one who told me about the high meadows up in the mountains, how the grass stayed sweet there even in the dry months. He had lived here since the gold rush, knew the land like his own hand. That advice saved my ranch, probably saved me too." Priscilla found herself watching his face as he spoke, fascinated by the play of emotion across his features. "Why did you leave Texas?" "Family troubles." "My father wanted me to marry a woman I did not love, take over his ranch, live the life he had planned for me. I wanted to make my own way, build something that was mine." Owen met her eyes. "So I left. Broke his heart, I imagine, but I could not be the son he wanted. I had to be myself instead." "That takes courage," Priscilla said softly, "or selfishness, depending on who you ask." But Owen smiled when he said it without bitterness. "What brought you to hat making? Or rather, what brought you to San Francisco in the first place?" It was Priscilla's turn to look away, to focus on the felt samples rather than his too knowing gaze. "My parents died when I was 16, influenza epidemic. I had no other family, or so I thought at the time. I took work where I could find it, and I was good with a needle. A woman does what she must to survive. Alone in San Francisco at 16. Owen's voice had gone quiet. "That must have been hard. It made me strong. It taught me not to depend on anyone but myself." Priscilla held up 2 felt samples. "Which of these do you prefer?" Owen studied them, then pointed to the darker brown. "That one. It will hide the dust better. Practical," she smiled. "I can have this ready for you in a week. Will that suit? It will give me an excuse to come back to town next Saturday." Owen stood, retrieving his old hat from the counter. "How much do I owe you?" They negotiated a price that was fair to both, and Owen counted out the money in coins and bills, pressing them into her hand. His fingers lingered over hers for just a moment longer than necessary, and Priscilla felt that now familiar warmth spread through her chest. "Will you let me buy you lunch, Priscilla? There is a decent restaurant 2 doors down, and I would enjoy the company." She should say no. It would be improper, would give the town gossips something new to discuss. But she heard herself saying yes before her practical side could intervene. The restaurant was small and plain, with checkered tablecloths and simple food. But Priscilla enjoyed it more than any fancy San Francisco dining room she had ever glimpsed from the outside. Owen was easy to talk to, asking questions that showed genuine interest and sharing stories that made her laugh. He told her about his cattle, about the young horse he was training, about the mountain lions that sometimes prowled too close to his ranch. She told him about her dreams for the millinery shop, about the designs she wanted to create, about the fashion magazines she had saved for years. "You could go back to San Francisco," Owen said at one point, his voice carefully neutral. "With the inheritance from the shop, you could start fresh there, maybe open your own business in a bigger city." "I could," Priscilla agreed, "but I think I would rather stay here. Idaho City is small, but it is mine. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Owen's smile could have lit up the entire restaurant. "I felt the same way about my ranch the first time I saw it. Home is not about the place, it is about the belonging." They lingered over the meal until the sun slanted low through the windows and the restaurant owner began giving them pointed looks. Owen walked her back to the shop, his hand occasionally brushing her arm as they navigated the crowded Saturday street. At her door, he paused, hat in hand again. "Thank you for the lunch and the conversation, Priscilla. It has been the best Saturday I have had in a long time. Thank you for inviting me, Owen, and for defending my hat that first day. I never properly thanked you for that. That hat is magnificent, and so are you." He said it simply, with such sincerity that Priscilla felt tears prick her eyes. "Until next week." "Next week," she promised. She watched him walk away again, and this time she admitted to herself what her heart already knew. She was falling for Owen Rutherford, this cowboy with kind eyes and gentle words, and she had no idea what to do about it. The weeks passed in a pattern that became both comfortable and torturous. Owen came to town every Saturday, picking up his new hat, which was indeed handsome, and then finding other reasons to visit. He needed a new hat band. His ranch hand needed a hat. He wanted to order something special as a gift for a neighbor. Each visit meant time spent in Priscilla's shop, conversations that ranged from trivial to profound, moments when their hands would brush, and the air would seem to crackle with unspoken feeling. Priscilla's business flourished. Word spread about her skill and creativity, and women began coming from the surrounding ranches, and even from boys on occasion. She made Martha Green's hat for the wedding, and was rewarded with 3 more commissions from guests who attended. She created a dramatic piece for Delilah, the saloon owner, all black feathers and crimson ribbons, that became the talk of the town. She repaired old hats and designed new ones, working long hours at her table while the summer heat gave way to the crisp promise of autumn. And through it all, she thought about Owen. He was in her mind when she woke and when she fell asleep. She caught herself designing a hat in shades that would complement his eyes. She saved bits of news and funny observations just to share with him on Saturdays. It was ridiculous, this growing attachment, but she seemed powerless to stop it. The trouble was, she could not read him. Owen was unfailingly kind and attentive, but he treated her with a respect that bordered on reverence, as though she were something precious and fragile. He never pushed for more than she offered, never suggested anything improper. Part of her appreciated his restraint. Another part wanted him to throw restraint aside and just kiss her already. It was late September when everything changed. Priscilla was closing up the shop on a Thursday evening, pulling the curtains across the windows and banking the fire in the stove, when she heard shouting from the street. She stepped to the door and saw a crowd gathering near the saloon, people pointing and talking in agitated voices. Martha Green rushed past and Priscilla called out to her. "What is happening?" "Owen Rutherford," Martha called back. His ranch hand just rode in saying Owen went after cattle thieves alone up in the high country. He took a bullet, Priscilla. They are bringing him to Doc Morrison now. The world tilted. Priscilla gripped the door frame, her knuckles white. "Is he badly hurt?" "I do not know. I am sorry, I have to go. My husband is on the search party." Martha disappeared into the crowd. Priscilla did not remember locking the shop or running down the street. She pushed through the crowd outside the doctor's office, ignoring the protests and scandalized looks. The door was open, and she could see men inside, hear the low rumble of voices punctuated by a sharp groan of pain that made her heart stop. "Miss, you cannot go in there," someone said, grabbing her arm. "Let her through." That was Delilah, the saloon owner, appearing at Priscilla's side like an avenging angel. "Can you not see she cares for the man? Let her through or answer to me." The crowd parted. Priscilla burst into the doctor's office to find Owen on the examination table, his shirt cut away, blood soaking the bandages around his shoulder. His face was white with pain, but his eyes were open, and when he saw her, something flickered in their depths. "Priscilla," he said, his voice rough. "You should not be here." "Hush." She moved to his side, taking his uninjured hand in hers. It was cold, and she rubbed it between her palms, trying to warm it. "How bad is it?" "Bullet went clean through," said Dr. Morrison, a grizzled man with sure hands. "He was lucky. Missed the bone and anything vital. He will be in pain for a while, and he needs to rest that shoulder for at least a month, but he will heal." "A month?" Owen protested. "Doc, I have cattle to move. Winter is coming. I cannot just rest for a month." "You will rest if I have to tie you to that bed," the doctor said firmly. "You lost a lot of blood, Owen. You need time to heal, or that wound will fester, and then you will be resting permanently." Priscilla squeezed Owen's hand. "He is right. You have to take care of yourself." "My ranch," Owen said, his eyes searching hers. "I have no one to manage it. My hand, Charlie, he is good, but he is young. He cannot handle everything alone." An idea formed in Priscilla's mind, reckless and utterly impractical. "Then I will help." Every man in the room turned to stare at her. "You?" Dr. Morrison said skeptically. "No offense, Miss Oliverson, but running a ranch is not like making hats. I can learn. I can keep records, manage supplies, handle whatever needs handling that does not require heavy labor. Charlie can do the physical work with some hired help." Priscilla kept her eyes on Owen. "Unless you have a better idea." Owen stared at her for a long moment, and she watched emotions play across his face too quickly to name. Finally, he said, "It would not be proper. You staying at my ranch, even with Charlie there. People would talk. Let them talk. I do not care what they think." And as she said it, Priscilla realized it was true. She had spent her whole life caring what people thought, trying to be respectable and proper and small enough not to cause offense. She was done with that. "I care about you, Owen Rutherford. I care that you are hurt and that you need help. Let me do this." "Priscilla," he said, and his voice broke on her name. "Let me do this," she repeated. He closed his eyes, and she thought he might refuse. Then he squeezed her hand, gentle despite his obvious pain. "All right. But only until I can manage on my own again." Dr. Morrison sighed. "I will stitch him up and give him something for the pain. He can travel in the morning if he takes it slow. But Miss Oliverson, if you do this, be prepared for consequences. This town has a long memory." "I am prepared," Priscilla said, though her heart was racing. She stayed while the doctor worked, holding Owen's hand through the worst of it, feeling him grip her fingers hard enough to bruise when the needle went in. She bathed his face with a cool cloth and murmured reassurances that she hoped he believed, because she was not sure she believed them herself. When it was done, and Owen was resting, dosed with laudanum and drifting in and out of consciousness, Priscilla went back to her shop and packed a bag. She left a note on the door explaining that she would be closed for the next few weeks due to a family emergency, which was not exactly a lie if she squinted at the definition of family. Then she went to the livery stable and arranged for a wagon to take her and Owen to the Triple Bar R at first light. She did not sleep that night. She sat in her small room and thought about what she was doing, the risk she was taking. If she did this, her reputation would be in tatters. The town that was just beginning to accept her would turn on her again. She might lose customers, lose her business, lose everything she had worked for. But the alternative was letting Owen suffer alone, letting his ranch fall into disrepair, letting him lose what he had built. And she found that she could not do that, not when she had the power to help. Dawn came soft and gold, and Priscilla was waiting at the doctor's office when Dr. Morrison brought Owen out. He was pale but steady on his feet, his arm in a sling and his jaw set in determined lines. He looked at her standing there with her bag packed and her resolve firm, and something in his expression shifted, softened. "You do not have to do this," he said quietly. "I know. I want to." The wagon ride to the Triple Bar R took 2 hours over rough roads that made Owen wince with every jolt, despite his best efforts to hide it. Priscilla sat beside him, steadying him when the wagon hit a particularly bad rut, pointing out the scenery to distract him from the pain. The Idaho Territory was beautiful in the early fall, the aspens turning gold against the dark evergreens, the mountains rising in the distance with their peaks already dusted with snow. "It is lovely," she said as they climbed higher into the foothills. "Wait until you see the ranch." Owen's eyes were closed, but he was smiling slightly. "The meadow is the prettiest place I have ever seen. I knew the moment I found it that I had to make my home there." The Triple Bar R revealed itself gradually as the wagon crested a final rise. The meadow spread out before them, vast and green even this late in the season, bordered by pine forests on 3 sides and a clear creek running through the center. The ranch house was log-built and solid, smoke curling from the chimney. Nearby stood a barn, a corral with several horses and various outbuildings in good repair. Cattle dotted the meadow, grazing peacefully in the morning sun. "Owen," Priscilla breathed. "It is beautiful." "It is home," he said simply. A young man emerged from the barn, moving quickly when he recognized the wagon. This was Charlie, Owen's ranch hand, barely 20 with a shock of red hair and worried eyes. "Boss, thank God you are all right." "When I heard about the thieves, I thought," Charlie broke off, clearly struggling with emotion. Then he noticed Priscilla and blinked in surprise. "Madam, this is Miss Oliverson," Owen said. "She is going to be helping out around here while I recover. Priscilla, this is Charlie Wells." Best hand a man could ask for, even if he is prone to worrying too much. Charlie flushed but helped Owen down from the wagon with careful hands. Priscilla followed, her skirts swishing as her feet touched the ground. Up close, the ranch was even more impressive, everything well maintained and organized with clear pride. Owen's house was a single large room with a kitchen area at one end and a sleeping area at the other, separated by a simple curtain. A stone fireplace dominated one wall and the furniture was handmade but sturdy. It was a bachelor's space, practical and plain, but Priscilla could see the potential in it. "You take the bed," Owen said as Charlie helped him inside. "I will sleep in the barn with Charlie." "You will do no such thing. You are injured and need proper rest." Priscilla set down her bag. "I will sleep in the barn. I will not hear any argument about it." "Priscilla, I cannot let you. You cannot stop me either. Doctor's orders were that you rest, and you cannot rest if you are worried about propriety. Charlie can help me set up a cot in the barn and it will be perfectly fine." She softened her voice. "Please, Owen, let me help the way I need to help." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are a stubborn woman, Priscilla Oliverson. I had a good teacher, watching you walk around town in your worn-out hat for months because you were too proud to admit you needed a new one." That made him laugh, which turned into a wince as it pulled at his shoulder. "Fair enough. Charlie, set Miss Oliverson up properly in the barn. And tomorrow, you two are going to sit down and go over everything about the ranch operations. Priscilla needs to know what we are facing." The first days were the hardest. Owen was restless and frustrated, used to constant activity and chafing at his forced idleness. Priscilla divided her time between checking on him, learning the ranch operations from Charlie, and trying to figure out how to manage an enterprise she knew absolutely nothing about. Charlie was patient and thorough, teaching her about feed schedules and water sources, showing her the records Owen kept of every head of cattle and their locations. She learned that the thieves had made off with nearly 20 head before Owen caught up with them, that there was still a risk of them returning, that the cattle needed to be moved to lower pastures before the snow came. "When does the snow usually start?" Priscilla asked, making notes in her careful hand. "Could be as early as October, could be as late as November. We need to have them moved by mid-October to be safe." Charlie glanced toward the house where Owen was resting. "It is hard work, moving that many cattle. Usually takes me and the boss and 2 hired hands at least a week. Then we will hire 3 hands instead of 2. You will manage the work and I will handle everything else." Priscilla tapped her pencil against the ledger. "We can afford it, barely if we are careful." "But what about you, Miss Oliverson? You cannot manage the house and the books and everything else alone." "Watch me," she said with more confidence than she felt. She threw herself into the work with the same determination she had brought to surviving in San Francisco. She cooked meals, learning from trial and error since her experience with cooking was minimal. She kept the house clean, mended clothes, maintained the ledgers. She rode out with Charlie to check on the cattle, sitting astride like a man because side saddle was impractical in the mountains, and she found she loved it, the freedom and power of it. At night, she collapsed into her cot in the barn, exhausted but oddly satisfied. This was nothing like making hats, but there was a similar pleasure in doing something well, in seeing immediate results from her efforts. And always, there was Owen. She checked on him multiple times a day, bringing him meals and changing his bandages and arguing with him when he tried to do too much too soon. They talked for hours, conversations that ranged across every topic imaginable. She learned that he had left Texas when he was 24, that he had spent 2 years drifting before finding the land for his ranch. He learned that her parents had been musicians in San Francisco, performing in theaters, until the influenza took them both within days of each other. "You must have inherited their artistic nature," Owen said one afternoon as she redressed his wound. It was healing cleanly, the flesh knitting together with minimal scarring. "The way you design hats, there is music in it, a kind of visual rhythm. That is a lovely way to think about it." Priscilla secured the new bandage, her fingers gentle on his skin. "How does it feel today?" "Better. Priscilla, I need to say something." Owen caught her hand before she could step away. "I know what this is costing you. The town will be talking, making assumptions." "Your reputation, my reputation, is my concern," she said firmly. "I am here because I choose to be, because I want to be. Do you understand that? I am trying to." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a feather-light touch that made her breath catch. "Why do you want to be here, Priscilla? Tell me true." She could have dissembled, could have given him any number of reasonable excuses. Instead, she found herself saying, "Because the thought of you hurting, of you struggling alone, was unbearable. Because in the few months I have known you, you have become important to me. Because when I think about my future, I see you in it." Owen's eyes widened, his grip on her hand tightening. "Priscilla, you do not have to say anything," she said quickly. "I am not asking for promises or declarations. I just wanted you to know the truth." "The truth," Owen repeated. He pulled her closer, and she went willingly, her heart hammering in her chest. "The truth is that I have been half in love with you since I saw you step off that stagecoach wearing that magnificent hat like you owned the world." The truth is that every Saturday I counted the hours until I could see you again. The truth is that when I got shot, the first thing I thought about was you, that I might never get to tell you how I felt." "Owen," she whispered, "I love you, Priscilla Oliverson. I love your courage and your creativity, and your stubborn refusal to be anything less than yourself. I love the way you wear impossible hats and speak your mind and rode out here to help me even though it could cost you everything." He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with infinite tenderness. "I love you, and I am asking if you might consider someday making your home here with me, not as my hired help but as my wife." Priscilla felt tears streaming down her face, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Owen, yes, I would be honored to be your wife." He pulled her down to him, careful of his injured shoulder, and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, a kiss that tasted like forever. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling through tears. "We should wait until I am properly healed to make it official," Owen said. "I want to do this right, court you properly, ask you correctly." "We can wait," Priscilla agreed. "But I am not leaving this ranch until you are fully recovered. Let the town talk. We know the truth of things." The weeks that followed were the happiest of Priscilla's life. Owen healed steadily under her care and Dr. Morrison's occasional check-ins. The hired hands arrived and successfully moved the cattle to the lower pastures under Charlie's direction. The weather held, crisp and clear, the aspens burning gold against the deep blue sky. Owen began teaching Priscilla to ride properly, to shoot a rifle in case of predators, to read the weather in the shape of clouds and the behavior of animals. She taught him about fashion and design, about the history of millinery, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful from raw materials. They talked and laughed and planned their future. Owen wanted to expand the ranch, maybe add sheep to the cattle. Priscilla wanted to keep her shop open, hire someone to manage it while she lived at the ranch. They would build a bigger house, one with separate rooms and a real workshop for her designs. They would have a life together, combining her artistry with his practicality, her determination with his kindness. By mid-October, Owen was moving with nearly his full range of motion, the wound reduced to a pink scar on his shoulder. Dr. Morrison pronounced him healed and cleared him to return to work, though he cautioned against overdoing it. "Time for me to go back to town," Priscilla said on the evening of the doctor's visit. They were standing outside the house, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of rose and gold. "I know." Owen slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "But not for long, just long enough to reopen the shop and start training someone to help manage it. And to face whatever gossip has been brewing." Priscilla leaned into him, savoring his warmth. "I imagine they have had quite the time speculating about us. Let them speculate. We will give them something real to talk about soon enough." Owen tilted her face up, kissing her softly. "Come back to town with me on Saturday. I will speak to Reverend Thomas about posting the banns. We can be married in a month if you are willing." "A month seems like forever," Priscilla said, making him laugh. "Then we will make it 3 weeks. I am impatient to make you Mrs. Rutherford." They rode back to Idaho City together on Saturday morning, the first time Priscilla had been back to town in nearly 6 weeks. She wore her traveling dress and the famous feathered hat, sitting tall in the wagon beside Owen as they navigated the road down from the mountains. The town was busy when they arrived, the usual Saturday crowd filling the streets. And just like that first day, people stopped and stared as the wagon rolled past. But this time, their stares were complicated by knowledge and speculation. Priscilla could see it in their faces, the questions and judgments and assumptions. Owen brought the wagon to a stop in front of the millinery shop. He climbed down, then turned and lifted Priscilla down with his hands on her waist, holding her perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. The gesture was deliberate, public, claiming, "Let me help you open up," he said, loud enough for several nearby people to hear. "And then I have an errand at the church." Inside the shop, everything was as she had left it, covered in a thin layer of dust but otherwise unchanged. Priscilla moved through the familiar space, touching her tools and supplies, feeling the rightness of being back. "Are you sure about this?" Owen asked quietly. "Marrying me means giving up the safety of being on your own. You will be tied to a rancher's fortunes, to the hard life in the mountains." Priscilla turned to face him, this cowboy who had seen her truly from the very first day. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. You are my choice, Owen Rutherford. You and the ranch and the life we will build together." He crossed the room in 2 strides and kissed her thoroughly, his hands cupping her face like she was something precious. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret it," she smiled, straightening his collar with affectionate hands. "Now go talk to Reverend Thomas. I have a shop to reopen and probably a dozen people waiting outside to demand the truth." Owen laughed. "You will handle them brilliantly. You always do." He left, and Priscilla took a deep breath before opening her door to face whatever came next. The first person through the door was Martha Green, her face alight with curiosity and something that might have been approval. "Miss Oliverson, the whole town has been buzzing about you and Owen Rutherford. Tell me it is true. Tell me there is romance afoot." "It is true," Priscilla said simply. "Owen has asked me to marry him, and I have accepted. We will be married in 3 weeks." Martha clapped her hands together, beaming. "Oh, that is wonderful news. He is a good man, and you deserve happiness. Do not worry about the gossip, dear. Those of us who matter know you did a kind and proper thing helping him when he was injured. Even if I stayed at his ranch?" Priscilla asked, testing the waters. "Charlie Wells has been telling everyone who will listen that you slept in the barn and worked yourself to exhaustion keeping that ranch running. Anyone who wants to make something ugly out of that is a fool." Martha's voice was firm. "Now, I need to order a hat for your wedding. Something special to wear when I stand up as a witness." The day passed in a blur of customers, some genuinely happy for her, others clearly fishing for scandalous details. Priscilla handled them all with grace, answering questions honestly and refusing to be ashamed of her choices. By the time Owen returned in the late afternoon, she was exhausted but triumphant. "The banns will be posted tomorrow," he announced. Reverend Thomas was delighted to hear the news. He said Idaho City needs more happy endings. "Then we shall give them one," Priscilla said. The 3 weeks before the wedding flew past in a flurry of preparations. Priscilla designed and made her own wedding dress, a creation of cream silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She made herself a special hat too, more subtle than her usual dramatic pieces but no less beautiful, adorned with silk orange blossoms and a short veil. Owen came to town every Saturday, and they spent the days together, walking out properly now that their engagement was official, making plans and dreaming aloud. He was building an addition to the ranch house, a real bedroom and a workshop for her millinery. She was training a young woman named Alice to manage the shop, teaching her the basics of hat making and customer service. The town, for the most part, embraced their romance. Oh, there were still those who whispered and judged, but they were outnumbered by people who were genuinely happy for the couple. The story of how Owen had defended Priscilla's hat on her first day had spread and grown in the telling, becoming a kind of local legend about true love recognizing itself at first sight. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in November, and the whole town turned out for it. The small church was packed, people crowding into every available space. Priscilla walked down the aisle on no one's arm because she had no one to give her away, and she refused to pretend otherwise. She walked alone and proud, her head high under her flower-trimmed hat, her eyes locked on Owen waiting for her at the altar. He wore a new black suit that he must have ordered special from Boys, and his hair was neatly trimmed, but it was his face that took her breath away. He looked at her like she was a miracle, like he could not quite believe his good fortune. His eyes shone with unshed tears as she took her place beside him. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony with warmth and sincerity, speaking about love and partnership, about two people choosing to build a life together against all odds. When it came time for the vows, Owen's voice was steady and strong. I, Owen James Rutherford, take you, Priscilla Ann Oliverson, to be my wedded wife. I promise to honor you, to cherish you, to stand beside you in whatever storms may come. I promise to love you all the days of my life. Priscilla's voice was clear despite her tears. I, Priscilla Ann Oliverson, take you, Owen James Rutherford, to be my wedded husband. I promise to honor you, to support you, to build a life with you that honors us both. I promise to love you all the days of my life. The ring Owen slipped onto her finger was simple gold, but it felt like the most precious thing she had ever worn. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her with such tenderness that half the women in the congregation sighed aloud. The celebration afterward was held at the town hall, with music and dancing and more food than Priscilla had seen in one place since leaving San Francisco. People came up to offer congratulations and well wishes, and she accepted them with grace, her hand tucked securely in Owen's. They danced together as the sun set, Owen leading her through the steps with surprising grace for such a big man. "Happy, Mrs. Rutherford," he murmured against her ear. "Happier than I ever imagined possible, Mr. Rutherford." They left the celebration as the stars emerged, riding out of town in Owen's wagon toward the ranch. Priscilla leaned against her husband's shoulder, marveling at the rightness of that word. Husband. She had a husband, a home, a life stretching out before her full of possibility. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, his arm around her waist. "That first day when I stepped off the stagecoach and everyone laughed at my hat. If someone had told me then that I would end here, married to you and so completely happy, I would never have believed them." "I would have," Owen said. "I took one look at you and knew my life had just changed forever. You were so brave, so determined to be yourself even when they mocked you. How could I not love that? You saw me," Priscilla said softly. "Really saw me, not just the hat or the outsider, but me. That was the gift you gave me that day, Owen. You made me feel seen. I will spend the rest of my life seeing you, loving you, celebrating you exactly as you are." He kissed the top of her head. "Every magnificent, stubborn, creative bit of you." The ranch rose before them in the moonlight, the new addition to the house, a dark outline against the stars. Owen carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition of it, and set her down gently in their home. It was not a fancy place, would never be mistaken for a San Francisco mansion or even a wealthy rancher's spread. But it was theirs, built by Owen's hands and filled now with Priscilla's touches. She had made curtains for the windows, arranged wildflowers in jars, hung some of her hat designs on the walls as decoration. "Welcome home, wife," Owen said, pulling her into his arms. "Home," Priscilla repeated, tasting the word. "Yes, I am home." They made love for the first time in the bed Owen had built himself, discovering each other with tenderness and passion, learning the language of their bodies. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking quietly as the moon tracked across the sky. "What happens now?" Priscilla asked, her head on Owen's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Now we build our life. We work the ranch, you make your hats. We survive the winters and celebrate the springs. We grow old together." Owen's hand stroked through her hair, gentle and sure. "We love each other, Priscilla. That is what happens now. We love each other every single day." "That sounds perfect," she whispered. The years that followed were not always easy. The winters in the Idaho mountains were brutal, testing their endurance and resourcefulness. There were seasons when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight, when they had to choose between new equipment or paying hired hands. There was the year a late frost killed half their calves, and the year a mountain lion got into the barn and injured 3 horses before Owen could drive it off. But there were triumphs too. Priscilla's millinery shop continued to thrive under Alice's management, providing steady income that supplemented the ranch. Owen's careful breeding program produced cattle that brought premium prices at market. They expanded slowly and sustainably, buying adjacent land when it became available, building their herd's reputation for quality. And through it all, their love deepened and strengthened. They learned each other's rhythms, developed their own private jokes and traditions. Owen would bring Priscilla wildflowers from the high meadow every spring, and she would make him a new hat every year for Christmas. They worked side by side during the busy seasons, and they spent the long winter evenings reading aloud to each other by the fire. In the spring of 1875, Priscilla gave birth to their first child, a daughter with Owen's brown eyes and Priscilla's stubborn chin. They named her Rose, after the wild roses that grew along the creek. Owen wept when he held his daughter for the first time, this big rough rancher brought to tears by the tiny miracle in his arms. "She is perfect," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You are both perfect." Priscilla, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at him. "We made her together, this little person. Can you believe it? I can believe anything now. You taught me that." Rose was followed by 2 sons, born in 1877 and 1880, both strong, healthy boys who inherited their father's size and their mother's creativity. The ranch house grew to accommodate the expanding family, additions and modifications happening bit by bit as time and money allowed. Priscilla continued to design hats, working in her workshop while her children played at her feet. She taught Rose the art of millinery when the girl showed interest, passing down the skills she had learned. Owen taught the boys to ride and rope, to read the land and the weather, to care for the cattle that were their livelihood. The family became a fixture in Idaho City, known for their kindness and their slightly unconventional ways. Priscilla still wore her dramatic hats to church every Sunday, though these days she made smaller versions for Rose too. Owen was respected as a fair rancher who treated his hired hands well and always paid his debts. Their children were welcomed in the schoolhouse and included in town events. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Priscilla with a trip to Boise. They left the children with Charlie, who had become like family over the years, and spent 3 glorious days in the territorial capital. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants, and went to the theater to see a traveling performance. On the last night, sitting in the hotel room, Priscilla said, "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me, I mean. Your life would have been simpler if you had chosen someone else, someone who already knew ranch life." Owen looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Regret marrying the love of my life. Regret every perfect day we have spent together, every child we have made, every dream we have built. Priscilla, you are the best decision I ever made. You took my house and made it a home. You took my solitary existence and filled it with laughter and love and meaning. How could I ever regret that? I just wanted to hear you say it, she admitted. Sometimes I still cannot quite believe this is my life, that I get to have you and the children and the ranch and my work. It seems almost too good to be real. It is real. We made it real together. Owen pulled her into his lap, his arms strong around her waist. And we will keep making it real every day for the rest of our lives. They kissed, long and deep, and then made love in the fancy hotel bed with the same passion they had shared on their wedding night, the same tenderness they brought to each other after a decade of partnership. The years continued to flow past, measured in seasons and harvests, in children's birthdays and anniversaries. Rose grew into a talented milliner, eventually taking over the Idaho City shop entirely so Priscilla could focus on custom orders and new designs. The boys became skilled ranchers, working alongside their father to expand the Triple Bar R into one of the most successful operations in the territory. When Idaho achieved statehood in 1890, the Rutherford family celebrated along with the rest of the territory. They had been part of building this place, had contributed to its growth and development. Their story had become part of the larger story of Idaho itself, woven into the fabric of the state's history. Priscilla and Owen grew old together, their hair turning silver, their faces acquiring the lines and character that came with a life fully lived. They became grandparents and then great-grandparents, presiding over a sprawling family that gathered at the ranch for holidays and celebrations. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a party that spilled out of the house and across the meadow. There was music and dancing and endless food. The grandchildren ran wild under the indulgent eyes of their parents. Owen and Priscilla sat together in chairs brought out especially for them, watching the chaos with peaceful contentment. 40 years, Priscilla said, her hand in Owen's. Both their hands showed the marks of age and work now, but they still fit together perfectly. It went so fast. And yet every day felt full, Owen replied. Not a single one wasted. Do you remember that first day, when you tipped your hat and called me grand? Priscilla smiled at the memory, so distant now but still clear in her mind. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen. Standing there in that incredible hat while they all laughed, refusing to be anything less than yourself. Owen lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it with the same tenderness he had shown 40 years ago. You are still grand, Priscilla. Every day you are grand. She leaned over and kissed him, soft and sweet, aware of their children and grandchildren watching with fond smiles. Let them watch. Let them see what real love looked like, love that lasted and grew and strengthened over decades. I love you, Owen Rutherford, she said against his lips. Thank you for seeing me that day. Thank you for all the days since. I love you, Priscilla Rutherford. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me, for being exactly who you are. Owen's eyes were damp, but he was smiling. You made me the luckiest man in Idaho. The party continued around them as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Their family, the life they had built together, the love that had sustained them through 40 years of joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle. It was everything they had promised each other on that November day in 1872, and more than either could have imagined when a cowboy tipped his hat to a woman in feathers and recognized something worth celebrating. They sat together as the stars emerged, hand in hand, surrounded by love, and knew that their story was complete. Not ending, because love like theirs did not end but fulfilled. Every promise kept, every dream realized, every hope rewarded. The town had snickered at her fine feathered hat that long ago July day. But the cowboy had tipped his own and called her grand, and in doing so, had changed both their lives forever. From that single moment of recognition and respect had grown a love story for the ages, a partnership that had weathered every storm and celebrated every success, a family that would carry their legacy forward for generations to come. As the moon rose over the triple bar R, Owen and Priscilla Rutherford sat in perfect contentment, knowing that they had lived well, loved deeply, and built something that would endure long after they were gone. Their story, begun with a hat and a tip of respect, had become the foundation for everything that followed. And it was grand, every bit of it, just as he had said she was on that very first day. The end came peacefully for both of them. Owen passing in his sleep in the winter of 1914 at the age of 87, and Priscilla following him just 3 months later at 85, unable or unwilling to continue without her partner of 42 years. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones simple but carved with care by their grandsons. Owen's epitaph read, "He saw the grand in everyone." Priscilla's read, "She taught us to wear our truth proudly." The triple bar R continued under the management of their children and grandchildren, and the millinery shop in Idaho City remained in the family for 3 more generations. But more than the physical legacy, they left behind a story that their descendants told and retold, of how love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, of how a moment of kindness and recognition could change everything, of how 2 people who refused to be anything less than themselves found each other and built a life of meaning and joy. In that story, in those memories, Owen and Priscilla Rutherford lived on, forever young and in love, forever standing together against a world that tried to make them small, forever proving that grand gestures and fine feathered hats and cowboys who knew quality when they saw it could create something that lasted far beyond a single lifetime.